Hi Dan, good to see you.
Alistair, how are you?
Yeah, I'm very well. Looking forward to talking with you about what I believe we kind of described humorously as the Pebble Beach bloodbath for classic cars. Yeah, and we joked about it, and I just wanted to kind of record this video to because I was amazed at the fact that the classic car industry aren't even talking about this. This is the biggest car auction in the world,
Yeah,
and the nobody's talking about some of the bloodbath describes not all the car sales, but a significant number of car sales which
sure.
were
Yeah,
significantly below what they've ever been before.
sure.
I looked at it, and using your 30 years of experience in classic cars, and of course you're the data guy, you know so much about so much data about all classic cars, and you're going to share some of that in this video about the data behind what was really, I guess, I mean, I looked at it and I thought, well, this is a catastrophe, for some classes of classic cars, not all. And I was astonished that no one's talking about it. And I guess a lot of people listening to this video may not even be aware that there was a quote unquote bloodbath in Pebble Beach classic car auction. And if they did know about it, they were like, well, no, why is no one talking about it and what's behind it? And that's what I want from this video is I want you, because you've got all this information and knowledge from your years of experience and you know the data behind it.
Hmm.
And unlike the rest of the classic car industry or most of it, you're actually going to share that with us in this video. So I'm really looking forward to that. So
Yeah,
do you want to summarize what's behind it and why no one's talking about it?
the year has been down. The year has been soft. And you don't hear a lot of people talking about it.
Mm,
You don't hear, when you open magazines and you look at who advertises in the magazines, the full page ads and the two-page ads are often auction companies. So I think I don't know if it's a conflict of interest, but a lot of the publications don't want to talk about the market when it's soft, or they don't want to shine a flashlight on the fact that the market is particularly soft because their advertisers are auction houses and they don't
yeah.
want to be talking about it. So you don't hear a lot about it. Um, yeah, a lot of people are oblivious to it. A lot of people are oblivious.
So Dan, could you just summarize some of the trends that are going on here?
Well, we saw a few trends, right? We saw a few trends. We saw some things that were strong, and we saw some things that were weak, and we saw some things that were very weak. So it's kind of interesting if we look at what went wrong for the people who had a vehicle that was $1 million or more. It was remarkable how many of them either didn't sell or sold below the low estimate. And to me, that's the criteria. How many either didn't sell or sold below the low mark. And it was remarkable, one after another. Old Ferraris, Lamborghini, whatever it was. Lamborghini actually was strong, but Ferrari, Porsche in particular, I think were unexpectedly weak. So there was that going on. Aston Martins were soft, and they've been soft now for a few years. Maserati was just, I mean, dead. Old Maseratis have just taken such a hit. It's tough. It's really tough. So I think the trends we're looking at a continuing trend where the baby boomers are selling more than they're buying, which is kind of, I think the main thing that's coming in through the market is that younger collectors are interested in later model collectible cars, and the stuff out of the 50s and 60s, unless it's remarkable, it's been soft.
Mm.
So those are kind of just a broad brushes of the trends that are going on in the market. And the reason that they don't, I mean, you don't read it in the car magazines. You don't, people don't talk about how soft the market is. Um, in particular, I mean, you see it in online auctions, you see it in live auctions. For the last year, the market has just been continuing to soften. And I mean, we can debate what's behind it. Is it the economy? Is it interest rates? In America here, we have an election year coming up, and it's sort of a divisive. People don't know what's going to happen after the election, and is it going to be a smooth election? I don't know if that causes problems. I would imagine the biggest driver that we have going on is just aging baby boomers, right? The older you get, the more difficult it is to get in and out of some of these sports cars.
Mm,
Um, and we see it with our clients all the time. They've got, they've got, 8 or 10 cars, and they're going to pare down to two or three.
mm,
Uh, so there's just more sellers. I think in a lot of the stuff out of the 50s and 60s, there's more sellers than there are buyers.
yeah.
So that's kind of the general trend I think that's pushing a lot of this.
Yeah, so can you share with us in this call, obviously some of the data to
Mm.
because you've actually got real actual data that
Yeah.
shows these trends, and then what we can also cover in this call, because obviously you helped so many people buy and sell cars for so many years, and as we actually, there's another video that I did with you which was explaining how 90% of the time people will actually get more money in their pocket if they go through an experienced dealer such as yourself rather than going through the auctions, and that's explained in that other
Yeah.
video which they can see on your YouTube channel if they're interested in that. But I think a lot of buyers and sellers are going to be, in view of all this data that you're going to share, they're going to be saying to themselves, well, what should I do to protect? If I'm looking at it from an investment point of view, what's the best course of action to protect myself? Should I just wait around and see certain cars continue to plummet in value, and should I maybe get on board some of the ones that are increasing in value,
Yeah.
despite what's going on in the rest of the market? So yeah, it'd be great if we can look into that data and you can give some
Yeah.
insights.
Yeah. It's a challenge taking them to auction. And we find that we can pay as much for most of the cars, we can pay as much to a seller as he'll get in his pocket after paying the fees. I think 53% of the vehicles that went up for auction at the Pebble Beach Monterey auctions were no reserve, right? Meaning that whatever the bid was, they were going to sell for that. So if they've told you that your car is going to bring 150,000 to 175, and it only brings 100 grand, then it sells. So no reserve auctions can be a real gamble. Um, so that's and that was, as I said, that's over half of the vehicles. Half of the vehicles that went through the auctions were at no reserve. Um, and then sellers have to decide. Really, it's a matter of deciding why you're selling. If you're selling because you want to buy something else, then selling in a soft market is not necessarily a bad idea, right? Because you're going to be buying in a soft market. So if you get less for your car than you may have got last year, if you're going to buy something else, there's a high likelihood that you're going to buy it cheaper than you could last year. So getting out of one thing and getting into another in a soft market isn't necessarily a bad thing.
Okay, Dan, let's go through the Pebble Beach sales auction data on your spreadsheet. These are the cars that were actually sold at Pebble Beach, aren't they? This is a record of.
They are. Yes, we've gone through and just entered for the two leading auction houses, Gooding and RM. So this is Gooding and RM. I'll explain what we've got. Things in red either didn't sell or they sold below the low estimate, right? So this one here goes a Ferrari that was estimated 6 to 8 million, and it bought 5.35 million, right? So he was expecting 6 million, he got 5.3. You go down here 1.4 to 1.6, he got 1.38. So in red, it either didn't sell or it sold below the low estimate. And then of course the auction house is going to take their fees built into that number that they're going to take. Depending on what it is, it could be 10%, could be as much as 20%. So the seller's gonna get substantially less than that what was it, 1.38 mil. I don't know if he'll end up with 1.2, 1.1, something like that, but
Yeah.
it's a hit from what this person was expecting.
So that's like, as we covered in the previous video, the big mistakes people make at auction, where we explained how 90% of the time people will actually end up with more money in their pocket if they go through an established dealer like yourself, rather than in an auction where often the, the headline price which they actually got, you then
Yeah.
have to take quite often up to 20% of commissions off and fees off that. And that often means they're actually getting, some of these cases, even where they're green, they still may be getting below the low estimate. And then the other thing I wanted to ask you is about, in previous years, have you ever seen so much red?
No, I think it's more concentrated. The red's more concentrated. If we look, let's just look at highest to lowest, right? So the highest price cars, as we scroll down, they get cheaper. And what you can see here, and this may be interest rate related, it may be simply that where the economy is very soft and people are feeling it. So vehicles that were in the millions, you can see that there's a lot of red. So they either didn't sell or they didn't hit estimates. And once you get down, you can see the line about 1.2 million. All of a sudden, you start to see more green, right? So more green comes in, cheaper the car goes. You see more and more green as you scroll down, right? So this is where, if we were looking at the bloodbath, where did the bloodbath occur? It was in vehicles that were, it looks like about 1.3 million. Once you hit 1.3 million, the screen becomes, there's a lot of red in the screen. The other
And
thing
also,
that's
they're much older vehicles on the whole there. If you looked over
generally
the
speaking, yes,
years,
that's right.
yeah, the
Generally
majority.
speaking.
Yeah.
Yeah, if we look at this, and this is just, we've organized it by age of the vehicle, right? So the older vehicles, you see more red, right? So as the vehicles become younger, you'll see that a little more green comes in. And this is baby boomers selling cars. New collectors are not interested in the older stuff as much as, right? And then as it gets, and here's the interesting thing, once you get to about 1995, right? So you start to get into the 90s. By the time you get to, here we are, 1995, all of a sudden there's a lot more green, right?
Yeah. But
There's
by the
a,
way, Dan, would you be happy to f share this spreadsheet with people if they email you?
yeah, sure, absolutely. Yeah, I'm happy to share it with them.
So they just need to email you on the, we'll put the email address below. So if they want to, yeah, get the actual spreadsheet, they can.
Yeah, and when you look at Ferraris. So if we look, yeah, by year, the older Ferraris either didn't sell or missed their estimates, right? There's lots of red on the screen. And then as they get newer and newer, and there's pockets of strength, Daytonas seem to do pretty well. Dinos seem to do pretty well. Those have been a couple of strong points in the 70s, but there's still a fair amount of red. And then once you get in, once we get to about 1995, you can just see that it changes from lots of red to predominantly green, meaning that they exceeded estimates. And then in Porsche, it's not quite as dramatic in Porsche, but you do see the same thing. Once you get into the middle 90s, right? So here we go into the middle 90s. It's a lot more green. And that's just an indication that the collectors who are coming on into the market, it's probably two things, right? It's probably the fact that younger collectors are interested in the cars that they fell in love with when they were teenagers.
Mm.
And also the more modern stuff is less expensive. If we go back to the highest, most expensive cars, the ones that are in the millions, we'll notice that they're all kind of 50s and 60s sports cars, right?
Mm.
And then as you get to the cheaper things, you start to get more things out of the 90s and then the 2000s and so forth. So it's probably a combination of the newer stuff is not that expensive yet, and the new collectors are more interested in the cars that they loved when they were teenagers. And I think those two things, and then, baby boomers just paring down their collection. It's time for them to cash out. And for some of them, some of them may not care, but some of them will be concerned that they've waited too long. So yeah, let's do a little bit of a dive into some individual cars here. You can see this is 300SL Mercedes over the years have done really well. 300SL Roadsters seem to be particularly soft. So there's a string of them in this here. You can see them through here, right? 300SL Roadsters. Here's one that sold for 1.35 mil. The estimate was 1.6 to 1.8, and it sold for 1.35, right? So 1.35, he's going to get about 1.2 in his pocket, and he was expecting 1.6 to 1.8. Now, often what happens is this was a lovely car. It was through RM lot 1112, and it's kind of common when people see 1.6 to 1.8, they think to themselves, oh, my car's actually in fantastic condition. It'll probably exceed 1.8. And after fees, he's going to get 1.1 to 1.2. And then you can kind of see there's a string of them. They're all soft. 1.18, so that's little under 1.2. Estimate 1.4 to 1.6. Next one sold for 1.2 mil. Estimate was 1.3 to 1.5. This was at Gooding on Friday, lot number 56. So we've got a string of 300SL Mercedes that historically 300SLs have done very well, but you can see here a softening in them. And once again, that's a car that baby boomers have loved for very good reason. Fantastic car. And at the moment, I think there's just more sellers on the market than there is buyers.
Yeah. And it highlights what you've said before, where, say the first one, the guys may have gone in there with saying my 1963 Mercedes Roadster is in really good condition.
Yeah, fabulous car.
I would expect to beat the high estimate, so he's hoping for 1.9 or 2 million, and then he ends up it's 1.3, then minus all the fees. So he ends up with 1.1 something million. So he's getting 800,000 less than he had as an expectation in his mind.
Yeah.
And I think that's where a lot of people, they're not seeing that. They're just thinking, oh, my car's worth nearly $2 million.
Yeah.
And
yeah. And he's going to pocket a little over $1 million. And it's, it's a tough place to be. It really is. And then just at the other end of the scale, if you get into the more modern stuff, here we are here, and these are, 2009 Ferrari 430 Scuderia. This was RM on the Saturday session, lot 366. And, this is what we're saying about the younger collectors coming in the market. So this car sold for, 478,000. Estimate was 320 to 380. This did almost 100 grand more than the top estimate. And then you can just see this is, if we look at these Ferraris, here goes a 2008 430 Scuderia, and there's another couple of Ferraris out of the 90s. And you can see the other 430 Scud did 302, right? And it was in the midst between low and high estimate. Low estimate 275, high estimate 325. And the others were respectable. Here goes a 458 Spider, 2014 Ferrari 458 Spider. It was, let's see which auction house, Goodings, their Saturday session, lot number 190. It did $335,000, and the estimate was 200 to 250, right? And this is kind of the cars that the younger collectors are. They're, you think about it, younger guys, they have a business, they're doing well, they want to buy the cars that they couldn't afford when they were younger, and that is driving the market, and it's going to continue. There's probably, I would think these Ferraris have a couple of decades of there'll be some years where it's stagnant or soft, but the general trend is going to be that, something like a 458 Spider or a 430 Scuderia is just going to continue to be a strong car.
Yeah, I mean, if you were looking at it purely from a financial point of view, and obviously there's a lot of emotions involved when buying cars, but if I, for example, we looked at the 1963 Mercedes Roadster, and
Yeah.
if I, sold that and ended up taking a hit on my expectations of nearly 2 million and only got 1 point, but I actually sold it, and then I said, okay, I've got a lot less than I was expecting. But instead of leaving that money in the Roadster, which will continue to decline, I bought, say, three, you know, 2014 Ferrari Spiders.
Hmm.
That which are, that one there has gone well above the high estimate. If I bought three of those with my money in 5 years' time, I'm more likely to have seen an increase in.
Sure.
Whereas if I just leave it in the Mercedes Roadster, it's probably going to be worth less than even what I
Yeah,
got.
because you're swimming against the current,
Yeah.
right? You're swimming. So now a 300 SL Roadster is a fantastic car. It's a
Mm.
great car. It would be, if I was buying something out of the 50s or 60s, then it would be, potentially on the top of the list. But if you're looking at it to have some fun, because it's a blend, right? You want to have fun with the cars, and you also want them to do well. But any of these things, we can look down below. Here goes a Ferrari 550 Barchetta that RM sold on the Thursday, lot number 144. Um, Estimate was 400 to 500. It sold for 544, right? That's a great car. That car has 2 decades of rising tide, right? The trend for these cars, look at this. This is a 550 GTZ, so a Zagato bodied 550 Ferrari.
That's gone above one of the, again, few cars to go above the high estimate.
Yeah. Yeah. 841. Estimate was 6 to 8. And same again. I'm going to sound like a broken record, but that car, I would think that car has a long way to go. And whoever owns something like that is going to be able to enjoy a great car. And every time they see another one go up for auction, it'll make them feel good because the prices are likely to keep increasing. Um, so I think that's the trend is I mean, listen, if the money doesn't matter, you buy what you love. Um, and a lot of these modern classics are, they're fantastic cars. They're as much fun as the older stuff. It's a different driving experience, but they are as much fun as the stuff that we love out of the 50s and 60s.
So, Dan, in view of all that information you've shared with us and the trends that you're spotting, what there are going to be people right now who are sitting on some of the cars that are in the red
Hmm.
and are wondering, well, do I keep hold of it long term, and or is there an advantage to doing something now and maybe investing in one of the cars that's going up? What's your advice around that?
You kind of can't fight demographics, right? If prices are soft because of demographics, that's a really hard thing to fight because it's only going to continue in one direction, right? Stuff out of the 50s and 60s is going to continue, and into the 70s is going to continue to get soft, and vehicles out of the 90s and early 2000s are coming into their own, and they're probably going to continue to increase in value. People have been collecting cars since probably just after World War II. So we've got 70 years. Like if the next decade is anything like the last 7 decades, um, guys will still love cars. There'll be collectors out there. There'll be guys with money who want to spend it on fun things, and that group of guys is going to be younger, and so they're going to be interested in newer cars. If someone's looking at it as an investment, um, and we've seen collectors do this, get out of older cars and sell them at the current market price and buy into the newer stuff. And it can be, you know, it can be tough to sell in a soft market. It can be tough to sort of have enough courage to sell in a soft market. But if you're buying in a soft market, it can work quite well. And I can think of one collector who, you know, used to have old Packards and pre-war American cars, and he sold them all, and he started buying Italian classics, Ferraris and whatnot. And it was a fantastic move. And he was buying just as the Ferrari market, I think he was buying just as the Ferrari market was starting to rise back in the 90s, back in the 80s and into the 90s. And it was a fabulous move for him.
Yeah.
Because you end up getting into something. What you want to do is get on an elevator that's going up,
Yeah.
and the same things. I mean, it's the same things. If you're looking at old cars, modern cars, pre-war cars, it's the same. It's the same recipe, right? So it's looks good, goes fast. They didn't make very many of them, right? Those are kind of your criteria. There's cars that they made that go fast, but they made lots of them. And you want to be in stuff that are rare. And then it's condition, right? If you're looking at whatever it is you're looking at out of the 90s and into the 2000s, it's going to be rarity, performance, looks. And then when you've narrowed it down to the makes and models that you think you'd be interested in, then it comes down to condition, mileage, documentation, how well has the car been cared for, how many owners does it have, the kind of standard things that we look at when we're buying a car. But it's a struggle. It's a struggle to determine, do I want to sit out a little bit longer and see if the market will come back? The demographics are not going to change. The economy might get better, which would obviously help. Interest rates dropping, maybe that will help, but I'm not sure that's a real driver.
Yeah, I mean, looking at it, if I'm looking at that spreadsheet we went through, and I've got a couple of cars that are in the red and look like they're trending downwards, would you say that if I'm just looking at it from a pure investment point of view, rather than just watch them continuing to decline, would I be better off selling them for whatever I can get now? Again, through a dealer where I'm 9 times out of 10 going to get more money than through the auction.
Yeah.
And then obviously then looking at reinvesting that in the more modern classics that are more likely to go up in value. So replacing my portfolio, is that a strategy you think could be viable?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and it's a smart move. If you get into some rare Porsche, I think guys who are holding Maseratis and Aston Martins, those are probably two of the things that have been hit the most. And probably selling and then buying, Porsche or Ferrari from the 90s in through the 2000s. Any of the rarer stuff of, something like a Ferrari 550 Barchetta. I think they made 300. They didn't make very many. They made a few hundred of them. It's a convertible Ferrari. In that period, the modern classic period, those cars are going to have probably 2 decades of trending upwards. So get into something. Basically, what you want to do is get out of something that is most likely to trend downwards. Yeah. And get into something that the demographics, just the rising tide, is going to push them up. And then if it's just about the money, if it's about putting money in your retirement account, because there's a bunch of guys out there who have cars and the money, is going to go and help them as they retire. Then it's a matter of making, and it's a call. Do I sell this year? Do I sell next year? Probably selling in a stronger economy may be the right move. But the challenge is that if these cars are trending down, you can get a little bit of a balance where it's continuing to trend down, but the economy is strengthening, but it simply might not help.
Yeah.
So it can be a tough situation.
Yeah. And obviously, as a dealer, how you can help people, from my understanding, is obviously you've got a real, you've got your finger on the pulse with all of these various trends. You also have a list of potential buyers for any given car, because
Yeah,
and I'm sure if people have a, you have a dream car list, don't you? So if people have a dream car that they want, they can obviously email those
yeah.
details to you, and you'll keep an eye out for those. And being able to match a buyer with a seller, is going to obviously improve the price that potentially a seller could get.
The auction fees can be a big hit, and the challenge at auction is more than 50% of the cars they take are at no reserve.
Mm.
Meaning if the auction has a bad day, and there were a few bad days this year at Pebble and Monterey, at no reserve, it sells for whatever the high bid is, right? And that was 53% of the cars that went through, um, went through at no reserve. And when you go through a good dealer, you can actually pick your price, right? You don't have to, the price that you get isn't going to be determined on one good day or one bad day. You get to pick a price, and then we can go ahead, create a marketing plan, and then execute on it.
Yeah,
So, and we can provide data for people who are interested in selling and just show them where the market is.
yeah,
Uh, but as you said, if somebody has a vehicle, sort of a dream car that they're looking for, they can email us details of what they're looking for, and we just put it in our database. And when one comes up, they'll get a phone call.
yeah. So
So
that would be make, model, year potentially, and sort of condition that they're looking
yeah,
at.
what they're looking, yeah, if they're looking, if they're looking, I mean, we all want great low mileage cars, but some people are looking for something that's rare, that's a nice driver.
Yeah,
Uh, so yeah, yeah, I tell you,
yeah.
it was a tough August.
Wow. And that's obviously, you've got the data and the evidence to demonstrate that there is an issue in the market. And
Mm,
for a lot of people who maybe have one or two classic cars, and read the odd publication, they won't necessarily be aware of this,
yeah,
bloodbath, as we're calling it, because it's not being publicized. And I think that's the importance of this video, is it's bringing attention to something which is not getting much attention elsewhere in the
yeah,
classic car business.
yeah, definitely, definitely. Yeah.
Good.
It's a struggle. It's a struggle, but it's good if people, and there's opportunities, right? So that's a part of it is to look at it and say, well, where's the opportunity here?
Yeah,
Um, and for some, the opportunity is to get out of things that are declining, and to step into things that the general trend of the market and the general demographics are going to increase the values, right? There isn't anything that you have to do. You've got to get on the elevator that's going up. That's the that's
yeah,
the challenge. And for some, it means selling in the soft market and buying in a soft market.
yeah,
Um, and then over time, um, and there's nothing better. I tell you, there's nothing better than owning a car, and every year it increases in value a little bit. Makes me feel smart when that happens.
yeah. Yeah, but yeah, there's things people can do about it, because I think a lot of people might be sitting on their hands, or just
Sure. Yeah.
one, potentially be oblivious to what's going on in the market, and two, even if they are aware, they're sitting on their hands when they don't realize they could actually do something about it.
Sure. Sure.
Yeah,
Yeah. Um, fear can kind of freeze us in our tracks, and that feeling of loss, right? We feel loss two or three times more than the downside is more painful than the upside. So when
yeah,
we're in a downside situation, it feels a lot more painful than it really is. So a lot of people don't want to let go because it feels like they're losing.
yeah.
Uh,
I think you're right. I think a lot of people, if they had a car, say, worth $200,000, or they bought for $200,000, and then that they saw at one of the auctions a similar one went for 150, they
Mm.
wouldn't want to take the loss.
Sure.
But based on if that particular car of theirs is in the red category that we're discussing in this video, and it falls in value, if it's continuing to fall in value, that they'd actually be better off taking 150 for it now,
Mm-hmm.
reinvesting that in potentially some of the classic modern classics, which will actually go up in value. So in 3, 4, 5 years time, they'll have a car that will be more greater value rather than
Sure. Yeah,
one
yeah.
that's continued. So they end up, because they're just going to, and it's like, I guess, in stocks and shares, when sometimes it's time to cut your losses.
Yeah. And
And
some of the greatest strengths that we're seeing are in, Japanese collectibles,
mm,
um, which, 10 years ago, if you'd said to me, you're going to be, one of the things you specialize in is Japanese collectibles, I'm not sure I would have believed you, because there wasn't a market. There just wasn't a strong market for Japanese collectibles. But Toyota Supras, Acura NSX, um, yeah, Lexus LFA. There's a few that are really strong, and that's a segment. Japanese collectibles is a segment that's going to continue to strengthen.
mm,
Um, and there are a few savvy collectors who got on early, and there's a lot of young guys who had the means to buy when those cars were little more than used cars, and that wasn't long ago. That was just a few years ago. So there are segments of the market that are going to do incredibly well over the next decade. That's for certain.
right.
And it doesn't take much to figure out which they are. It's
Mm,
you just look at the demographics and you look at the trend, and a lot of those trends are going to continue for probably the next 2 decades.
yeah. So in summarizing what we've covered, I mean, obviously, if people want the spreadsheet, they can email you and get a copy of
Sure.
that. If they want to register their dream car with you, which means you'll be able to, because obviously you get a lot of people who want to sell coming to you as
Mm.
well, and so
Yep.
you'll be able to match them up um, with that. And then the other thing is, if they want to speak with you about their collection, and particularly in view of all these trends, what might be the best course of action in terms of buying and selling,
Yep.
they can obviously email you to arrange a conversation about
Sure.
that.
Absolutely. We'd love to chat with them about it.